Hi, this is Kathy from Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm going to be taking a look at the knives that I've been using in my kitchen for the past 30 years and comparing them to my Victorinox Venture Pro. Now, this set of knives was given to my husband and I when we got married, and it's got a set of steak knives along the bottom. There's a couple missing. I'll talk about the knives I have in that spot in just a second. But all of the knives in this set have this same serrated blade that's really thin, pretty flexible. It has all the way from a paring knife up to a larger kitchen knife. Now, the two knives that we've lost, I replaced them with these two knives that were given to me as a gift. This first one was described as a tomato knife. It's got a serrated blade also. It's a little bit thicker. Flexible, but not as flexible as the black-handled knives. It is good for slicing tomatoes and also cutting up stuff like French bread. And I've got another paring knife. These knives have served us well. The only time I've thought that I needed a better knife is when I'm cutting up sweet potatoes. I'm going to test a sweet potato with one of the steak knives because that's usually the knife I use when I'm cutting up a sweet potato. And I'll cut up another one with the Venture Pro. And I may also try slicing a tomato. The vegetable peeler that I'm going to be using looks like it came from the same set as my set of kitchen knives, but I bought it separately, and it's a very cheap, inexpensive peeler. In fact, the edges of it are serrated. It's not sharp like a serrated knife, so it's not really good for anything other than just digging into my fingers whenever I have to choke up like I'm doing in this case. So it's very uncomfortable to use, but for now it gets the job done. On this first sweet potato, I'm going to try cutting it up with one of my old kitchen knives, and on the ends and in areas where it's not as thick, this knife does just fine. I probably should have tried one of the larger kitchen knives, but those knives just tend to be too large and unwieldy for me. You can see I'm having to use quite a bit of effort to cut through it, and when I start getting to the thicker part of the potato, it's impossible to cut parallel, even slices. And when I cut through the middle of the potato here, it takes quite a bit of effort. And the handles of these knives, for the most part, are pretty comfortable to use, but when I have to put that much pressure on it, it's kind of uncomfortable. But once I get to smaller pieces, this knife is just fine. It's just for the thicker parts of the potato. When I get to the little parts where I'm just chopping it up, this knife performs just fine. The Victorinox Venture Pro has a much thicker blade, so I'm not going to have to worry about the blade flexing when I'm cutting through the wider parts of the potato. But I'm noticing right off the bat that this knife cuts through the potato like butter. It requires so much less force. And as I'm getting to the wider parts, since the blade's not flexing, I'm able to make nice, even cuts. This is nice. Now, even though this knife is quite a bit sharper than the previous knife, I still have to use quite a bit more effort to cut through the wider parts of the potato, but that's just because I'm kind of wimpy. But once I get to the smaller pieces, chopping up the smaller pieces. There's not a whole lot of difference between the two knives because, you know, it's easy cutting at this point. So where I used to dread cutting up sweet potatoes with my own knives, with the Venture Pro, it makes the job kind of enjoyable. I thought this sharp blade would just melt through this tomato, so I was kind of surprised that it needed as much force to get it started as what it ended up needing. This tomato's a little bit firm. I feel like a really ripe, soft tomato, you might end up starting to crush it before it cut through the skin. So my serrated tomato knife works much better, and probably the serrated steak knife would work just fine. It looks like for soft vegetables with a skin, a thin serrated knife is the way to go, but for more solid vegetables, it looks like my Venture Pro is going to be my tool of choice.